Thank you everybody for joining today's webinar. I'll start off with introductions quickly. So I'm Bruce Cullen. I am the Director of Products here at Cookdown, and with me in the room is Nathan Foreman, our Solutions Architect. Don't want to spend too much time talking about us because we've got a lot to cover in today's webinar. Today's webinar will focus again on the ServiceNow Connector suite of products. Just to give you a bit of an overview of what they are. We have the Alert Sync product, which we covered last time, as this is all about integrating SCOM alerts into ServiceNow and allowing you to raise incidents from those alerts. That was in last time's webinar. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. It's really cool. Then we have the Discovery product, which is all about populating your CMDB with SCOM's objects in the form of configuration items. And then we have Mapping. Mapping is all about joining the dots between those configuration items, populating your business services with CIs along with their relationships. So what are we doing today then? Today, we are focusing on the Discovery products. So what's that all about? We'll start sort of conceptually here, and then we'll go through into demo. So at a high level, you've got SCOM on the left-hand side and ServiceNow on the right-hand side. You have SCOM filled with its objects, of which there are lots of them, very deep, very detailed, lots of properties available on them. And on the right-hand side, you have ServiceNow's CMDB, full of configuration items, or maybe not, depending on how far you've got with Discovery. So when we are installed, we perform an initial discovery. We scan your SCOM objects based on rules you configure and match your SCOM objects against rules to see whether they match existing configuration items. If they don't, we create them. And if we do, then we update existing CIs. So when I say we, this is actually the identification and reconciliation API and functionality that's built into ServiceNow. It's their recommended way for ingesting CIs into the CMDB. We haven't sort of reinvented the wheel there. You can also schedule discoveries. So once you've done that initial discovery, you want to keep your CMDB up to date. Exactly the same process here. We'll scan your SCOM objects and match them against rules and create and update CIs depending on what's gone on. So the key question, what can I discover from SCOM? The answer is pretty much anything that SCOM monitors. So these are a large list of technologies, but anything through from sort of SQL, databasey stuff, Oracle, through to bits of Office, through to some of the cloud stuff in the form of Azure. But basically the headline is anything that SCOM can monitor, we can discover. That's the only kind of limitation. As far as getting set up is concerned, it's really, really straightforward. It's kind of a 3-4 step process. So first in SCOM, you find the SCOM objects you want to push through to ServiceNow and find the properties you want to push through with those objects. And then you create an import map in ServiceNow. So this basically maps the SCOM objects and their properties through to configuration item classes along with their attributes. Then you save that map into SCOM and you test the thing. And if it's all good, you turn it on. And that's it, basically. So now for the important piece, the thing that will take up the rest of this webinar today, demo time. So let me just pull up here my demo box. So what you're seeing now is our ServiceNow test instance. And what you'll see here is our CMDB. I've got it filtered on the class MS SQL database. As you can see, there's nothing to see here. And the same is true for my SQL instance. Nothing in here, completely blank. So these are the two classes I'm going to map with you guys here today. And I'm going to talk through how we do that. So now I'll show you how we do that. So I'll go through to SCOM. This is SCOM 2012 R2. I think we're running on this box. Yes, it's 12. And you can see that we've installed our discovery management pack down here. In the administration pane, you get a discovery node here. You can see I've already got some CI target classes set up here. I'll come back to these in a bit. But first, we're going to create a new discovery for a new target CI class. We're going to let that run in the background while we explain the rest. So I click up here, create discovery, and you'll ask for a sample instance, sample object. So essentially, the sample object is used in a couple of ways. I'm going to provide a database here. I'm going to map out database first. So first I filter on the group database, there it is. Search, I'm going to pick any old random database. There we go, whatever, ops16db. So the thing that's important really isn't the object that you pick, but the class that object is from. So this ops16db is from class MS SQL on Windows Database, which is the kind of latest, SQL agnostic version of the management pack. And you can see here the list of keys from which we can extract properties. This is the entire list of the keys that are available for this class. Now, an important thing to note here is these top bunch that I've highlighted are the keys directly relating to databases. But because of SCOM's hierarchical structure, I've got database engine keys, and I've got Windows computer keys in here as well. I think I've also got Windows cluster keys in here as well. So this is really useful when you're trying to deal with sort of dependencies, essentially, because you have all of this information available. The example values are for the provided object, but they're not actually that important to the process. Just it helps sort of get going and understanding what you're kind of doing. We tell you this key, for example, what type of data goes into it. We give you the display name for it. If I scroll right here, we give you obviously the class type. We also tell you what is SCOM's primary key for this class. So for the database class, the primary key is database name. So that's quite helpful for filling out identification and reconciliation rules and making sure that your maps are sensible, because, obviously a primary key will have to be unique for each class. So there we go. So I'm going to now go through to ServiceNow, and I'm going to show you how we use all of this data. So in ServiceNow, I have got, let's just make the windows fit. I've gone through to the identification simulation tool. So this is a standard ServiceNow tool. There's no kind of custom code from us here. This tool is used for essentially seeing what would happen if you uploaded a payload, like i.e. would you be creating a bunch of new CIs, would they get matched, etc. Or you can actually build those payloads yourself. So we're going to use this tool to build a payload ourselves using this key data on the right-hand side, and we're going to push that payload into Cookdown Discovery and go from there. So first we select a source, so Cookdown Discovery, obviously. I'm then going to pick a class I want to simulate. So in this case, it's the SQL class, Microsoft SQL Database. There it is. So the first thing you'll see is it gives you some dependence here. So a database can't exist as a CI in your CMDB in isolation. It has to be related to a SQL instance, and that SQL instance has to be related to something else. In this example, I'm going to pick Windows Server. Seems like a sensible one. Obviously, you can pick whatever you want. For each of these classes, you have to pick a way of identifying them as unique, and then provide the keys to deal with the details. So I'm going to say that databases are identified as unique based on database and class name. So this, by the way, is defined in ServiceNow's identification and reconciliation engine. So none of this is sort of cooked down code or anything weird and sort of wonderful. It's all standard ServiceNow stuff. So database. If I go through to here, my database name is stored in this key here, Microsoft.SQLServer.Windows.Database, database name. So I'm going to click it, Control-C, and paste the key over here. So what ServiceNow is expecting me to do in this simulator is to provide a specific here. So ops16db. But we're going to use this with the parameterized keys, because that's where we're going to feed this payload into Cookdown Discovery. So that's that. I'm going to provide the system class, which is the database class. If you want to provide additional attributes to push through, you can do that here. I'm going to do that. I'm going to push through a description, which is a string. So one thing that's really cool about Cookdown Discovery is you don't have to provide a single key. You can provide multiples of these things. Whoops, that's not what I meant to do. What I meant to do is that. So I'm going to provide in the short description key a list of keys, basically, and I'm going to separate them with just plain good old text so you can understand what they are. So I'm going to pop in here the database collation, the database recovery mode, and the database updatability. In other words, is it a read-only database or a read-write database? So rather than me dig out all the keys, I've got it in a notepad file, which is what I was just fiddling for there. So I've got just the word collation and then my key. And then I have got the words recovery model and then my recovery model key. You get the idea. You can chain as many of these keys together as you like. It's really quite flexible. And that's what I'm going to do. So going down to my SQL instance now, all I want to provide for this is a way of identifying that instance as unique or not. And for that, I'm going to provide the instance name and the class. So the instance name is a key from here. There it is, database instance name ops mgr. There it is. So I'm going to paste that in there. I'm not going to provide any additional attributes here. You can choose to do so, but we strongly advise that you don't, just because, one, it will work. It will create you a kind of support mess, essentially. If you want to push the SQL instance through as well as the database, it would be cleaner to create a separate payload for that instance class. Just because, you know, if you were to nest these things, to work out where CIs are coming from would be quite painful if you've got multiple of these rules. So we're just going to provide the minimum required, which is how do you identify this instance as unique? And the same is true of Windows Server. I'm going to identify it based on the name. And in my list here, I'm going to go down to my computer properties and pick the principal name. There it is, which is basically the machine's FQDN and the value of having the hierarchical keys provided too. So now in ServiceNow, I'm going to hit generate. So this will do one of two things. It will either generate me a nice looking payload like this thing, or it will error. If it errors, it will be something along the lines of there is some mandatory field in your CMDB that requires data pushing through to it. So you might have to add in additional attributes to cover those. Or it might be, you know, there's some data missing or something doesn't look quite right. You know, you provided a string to a Boolean or something to that effect. But it's not errored, so we know that this is good. I'm going to execute this now. So what ServiceNow will do with the simulator is assume you're providing real data. So for all of my lines here, it's saying it would have inserted a new CI, which obviously, you know, these are the keys themselves, not the contents of those keys, which is where Cookdown Discovery comes in. But what we really want from this is the payload, which looks like this. So I'm going to copy this and I'm going to paste it into SCOM. Back through to SCOM, to the wizard. There we go. So we'll hit next on there. So now you're asked for the identification payload, which is what you just created. In it goes. At the bottom, there's a button here, validate payload. So this will confirm that the payload provided is correct. If there are sort of typos in here, let's just break, I don't know, class name or something. It will error, payload is not correct. Fine, great. If the payload is correct, once you've validated it, this generate example button will highlight. So when I click this, what it will do is in this generated example tab, it will replace those keys. So you can see here, collation, for example, the key on generated example. It's taking from my example object that I provided in that first step the actual value of that key. So this is the string that will be provided for this CI in your CMDB. And there we go. That's what this will do. I'm going to hit next on this, as that looks good to me. And then ask for my ServiceNow instance name and URL. These are from global settings in Cookdown Discovery, but if you want to change them for a specific class type, you can do that. The same is true of discovery source, provided in global settings, but you can override it here. The ServiceNow target CI class and SCOM source class are coming from your payload that you provided earlier. You then have an enable disable flag. This is quite useful for building out your class list and then turning them all on in one go, or when you're happy with them, when they've been reviewed or whatever. You've also got the schedule here. So this is great for scheduling discoveries to run at different times of the day and how frequently you want them to run, basically. In this environment here, I've actually got this turned off with a demo license key because I want this discovery to run as soon as I hit finish, because I want to show you the results in ServiceNow rather than wait. This is where you would provide this information. It's quite good having these things separate on a per class basis. You might have a class that you want to run, less frequently, like say SQL database, because it doesn't change that much. And then other classes like say Windows computer that changes a lot more frequently to get the latest updates into ServiceNow. So there we go. I've hit create on that and there it is. I'm going to do exactly the same thing now quickly for my SQL instance, but in kind of demo style here. I have already created the payload. I'm not going to go through that again because you've already seen it. Let's just find the MS SQL DB engine. There it is. And search and find one of these things here. These are all of the key properties available, but on my desktop, which is an excellent place to store your files, I've got my map here, which I'm just going to paste through into SCOM like that, and I'll validate it and generate my example, and I'll talk you through what I've done here. So for the SQL instance, I'm going to provide the version of SQL, the edition of SQL. In my short description field, I'm going to push the auth mode, like is it Windows auth, is it basic auth, etc. The SQL connection string is there as well. I have the directory in which the master database is located, the directory that Windows is installed in, whether this SQL instance is clustered or not, that's a Boolean. I've hard-coded my TCP ports 1433. It's just a piece of text, that one. I provided the name as the instance name with the instance name key. Instance name is also the instance name key. Whoops. I am relating this instance to a Windows server with the FQDN in the form of principal name. So that's my generated example. That's what it will look like. So versions in there, authentication mode, etc., etc., etc. Looks good. I'm just going to quickly whip through this next screen and create this now so that Discovery can be kind of doing its thing in the background. And there we go. So next thing to show you is how you tell what's going on in the background. So if I go through to monitoring here and go to my discovered inventory tab, this is already pre-filtered for my demo on the outbound discovered class, which is basically all of my CIs. And there we go. They're all listed in here. If there are any errors in here, these will go unhealthy. So you can find out what's going on. So this might be, say, auth errors, or I don't know, there's a problem with the payload, that kind of thing, or ServiceNow is down, or whatever it might be. And then I'm going to go through back to my CMDB in ServiceNow. And in sort of demo style, I'm going to show you some I made earlier. So Windows Server, I already had set up. This is the result. I've got a list of CIs here, which are Windows computers. The payload that I provided for that looks like Windows Server. Here it is. So I've pushed through a bunch of properties here. And in ServiceNow, this is what it looks like. Let me pick one of these, SQL 01. So we've pushed through the serial number here, the domain, the operating system and OS version, the domain for the DNS domain. In the description, I've provided the SID and the OU for where this thing lives in Active Directory. The amount of RAM is here and the amount of CPU cores is here too. You can see a couple of relationships here which were created by my SQL instances. So that one's clearly fired in the background, along with my SQL servers, which I had pre-set up. I'll show you those in just a second. The other thing to show you here is if you right-click this grey bar and hit Show XML, there are some additional properties in here that the UI isn't currently displaying. I can show you that are pushed. So what have we got? IP address is a good example. There we go. So it's not in the UI here. It is a property that's available, but you get the idea. You could choose to surface these in the UI, but because they're in there, you can obviously use them as you see fit in ServiceNow. Useful data. I've also got my SQL Server class populated. So this is the SQL application itself, as opposed to the engine instance or the database. So annoyingly here, due to, Windows Update from the looks of things, I've got two slightly different instance revisions on each of my SQL machines. They're both 14 based, so I know they're fundamentally the same. And they've got the version number and the TCP ports, straightforward. Hopefully that's enough talking for some databases to have pushed through. Let's see. Yes, awesome. So this is the list of databases that were pushed through from that database rule that we created. Let's pick a random one. Here we go. So here we go. Here's that collation data and recovery mode and updatability field that I pushed through. If I go to SQL instance, let's see. There's a problem with my payload from the looks of things. Copy paste error, didn't provide a name. Stupid Bruce. Nonetheless, you can see it has worked and it's related to all of the databases that run on it. If I pop the dependency view open here, it looks quite cool. So you can see that this SQL instance runs on this Windows machine, and there's a bunch of databases that run on it too. Let me just expand this guy so you can see the list. There you go. So those are all of the databases that run on that instance, contained by, there you go. So these relationships are obviously whatever ServiceNow has set up in the CMDB here. So if you customize, you want to change these, there's no kind of custom Cookdown code. You just change the relationship model in your CMDB. So there you go. A really straightforward and simple product that will allow you to take any SCOM object type and push it through into ServiceNow, along with whatever properties you see fit or not. What you choose to push through is going to depend on the license that's available to you that you buy. But you can see that it can basically do anything, map anything to any ServiceNow CI class. It's a very powerful product, and it just kind of works, which is great. So there we go. So if you like what you've seen today, you can check out our website, cookdown.com/ServiceNow connector. You can email us, hello@cookdown.com. And there's good old Twitter @team_cookdown. Obviously, feel free to reach out to either myself or Nathan if there's any additional information. We'll do questions if there are any unanswered ones in a sec. But that's all we've got for today. So thank you very much for joining. We would usually at this point plug the next webinar, but we haven't currently got one planned because it's holiday season here at Cookdown. A bunch of us are going off on holidays, but likely after the summer period, we'll be back with a webinar on mapping. If you follow our Twitter @team_cookdown, you can find out when the next webinar is available, along with, finding out what we're up to and what conferences we're going to, etc. So that's everything for today, except to see if there are any questions. I've been hearing a lot of pings in the background. So let me just quickly find out the answer to that question. So quite a few questions. Looks like Nathan's been busy. What have we got? How much does it cost can I buy it right now? So cost, we will talk about in a sort of private setting, because the answer is it depends on what you actually want to discover. But more than happy to talk about costing sort of in a separate in a private meeting. And it is available to buy right now. What other questions have we got? Oh, is Cookdown owned by the same parent company as Squared Up? So we're being spun out from Squared Up. Has Nathan answered this one already? Okay, half.
About the same answer you had.
Okay, so we're being spun out basically from Squared Up. So currently we are in the process of doing that. So it's not completely finished, but that's the intention, that we are going to be a separate company from Squared Up. Yeah, and that's basically the answer. Let me see what else we've got. I think that's everything. Oh, I see the part of your question there, Tom. We're in discussions to figure out whether Squared Up can resell Cookdown products. It's likely it will be able to. So that shouldn't be an issue for your case. I'll drop you a line afterwards and give you the pricing information. But before we end this call, are there any other questions of any sort? And if not, thank you very much. If any question occurs, you can always email us or tweet us, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. Thank you very much for your time, and until next time. Thanks, guys.